Oh yeah, sure. In terms of retaliation, that's right. So what that means basically is that even if the U.S. wanted to do a strike, how can we do it without essentially tanking our own?
How can you basically balance this dynamic, right? It's too risky. But Japan say, let's go.
Well,
Do it.
look
Japan is
So look what happened. Very interesting. Carl Vinson announced the aircraft carrier battle was going to be part of the peninsula. And rumors about 6 nuclear events. And what I read in the Japanese media and requesting prior consultation of any kind of.
He was talking about this. He said something.
They're also, well, right now it's the issue of what that tells us is that for the United States, actually military action at this stage is still premature.
Do you think we are very concerned about if the U.S. strike, Seoul will be under?
Sure. They've got to be concerned. Absolutely.
It's possible the North Korea will really shooting Seoul and killing someone.
If they're under attack, then I think they'll retaliate. Yeah. Hey.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right.
And hello, my name is Effie.
Hi.
I'm a student of Jinan University, and we do some research on One Belt One Road policy as well as the Sino-US relations. And I talked with Elizabeth before about the North Korean issues, and she told me that you're the one who I really need to talk with. Can I ask you some questions? Well, first one. It is said that Korean Peninsula will be in war soon. Will America participate in the military actions against North Korea? And do you agree that military actions will be the best way to solve the North Korean nuclear issue as well as engage American with Asia?
Okay, I was just talking about that to them actually. So no, the U.S. administration has said that it's willing to consider all possible options.
Okay.
But in reality, the military option is very unattractive.
Yes.
It's, I would say, one of the two worst options. The other option that is really terrible is the idea of just letting North Korea be a nuclear state.
Yes.
Right? So those are the two worst options. It means basically that we have to find the next worst options. What would be better? And I think that right now, the main instruments that the U.S. is interested in using are increased sanctions, and kind of special operations / intelligence operations against DPRK missile development capability. So, for instance, trying to prevent North Korea from having a successful launch.
Okay. Can you give me an example about
Yeah, so for instance, last week North Korea launched a missile.
Yes.
But there's a debate over whether the missile failed because of DPRK technical mistake, or whether the U.S. directed some kind of electronic interference onto the missile site. Nobody knows.
Okay.
We don't know.
Okay.
But so the report has now been made public that the U.S. has been trying this. but it's very hard to confirm. And also, frankly, it's going to be impossible for us to know since it's public. It could be that the U.S. is trying that, but it could also be that the U.S. wants the story out there in order to get into the North Korean's head, right?
Yes.
So I don't know the answer. I don't think that we can know for sure about that. But essentially what we're trying to do is to buy a little bit of time with the recognition that we're coming to a point where, if we go all the way to the end of the road, we're stuck with the two really bad options.
Yes, I think
Right?
so.
And so we're trying not to get there. One thing that the U.S. is looking for in order to avoid getting there is really enhanced cooperation with China to put pressure on North Korea. Because, better than a military strike would even be, pressure on North Korea, so that if we put enough pressure on North Korea, we can expect one of two outcomes. One, Kim Jong-un will change his mind.
Yes.
That's probably low probability. But the second is that DPRK will face so much pressure that they could be destabilized. Okay, but that's a problem because I think the U.S. wants to see that level of pressure put on to Kim Jong-un, but China historically has prioritized stability as its top priority. And so I think that what we're trying to find out is how far will DPRK cooperate, how far will China cooperate to pressure North Korea, right? Because honestly, here's the dilemma. We know that Kim Jong-un is not going to give up his weapons unless he is facing an existential crisis where he has to make that decision. But China, if it wants stability, does not want to create the conditions where Kim Jong-un faces an existential crisis. Right? So there's a kind of, paradox there. It's a dilemma. And essentially the U.S. is asking for China to put that much pressure on North Korea, but I don't know if China will go along.
So, in your opinion, what actions do China need to do?
Right now, what the U.S. is looking for is more economic pressure.
Okay, economic one.
Well, China has a lot of economic leverage because North Korea's food and fuel, most of it comes from China.
Okay.
But, from China's perspective, that leverage is not very attractive because it could result in destabilization
Yes.
internally. And so that's the dilemma, is that China actually currently, has the vast majority of the leverage, but it's very hard for China to use that leverage without having to face adverse consequences. So we're left with a kind of dual dilemma. If the U.S. strikes North Korea militarily, North Korea will retaliate, and there will be costs that South Korea has to bear, very heavy costs, right? Or we can put economic pressure on North Korea that could generate instability, but those are costs that actually China would end up having to bear in terms of consequences, right? So basically what we're really talking about is kind of, in a way, it's an indirect negotiation over distribution of costs, with the recognition that North Korea is probably not going to peacefully change its mind about nuclear weapons.
Okay. So let's say if the military actions really happened, and maybe it will take refugees flows, or maybe lose nerves.
Yeah, all those are risks, yes.
Yeah, the risk to South Korea and maybe China. So in your opinion, what strategy will be needed for China to face the worst situation?
Well, the best strategy for dealing with this issue is it's really a collective action problem.
Yes.
We all need to work together to face and address this common issue in a way that distributes the costs as equitably as possible. So, but in order for us to have a collective strategy, we have to reduce strategic mistrust. And you know, the core of the gap between the U.S. and China over North Korea is really about the future of the Korean Peninsula.
Yes.
Right? And that's a